Hi, my name is Kyle Burkholder. Welcome to Covenant Conversations. Today, my guest is Carissa Wott, and we are going to be tackling fear and anxiety. How are they related? How are they different? And what do we do when they're unhelpful in our lives? This is an incredibly rich conversation. I cannot believe the depths we went to and how quickly we got to them. So I would encourage you to tune in, buckle up, bring a notepad if you got one, and pay special attention to the part where my fear of snakes comes up yet again. And so I'm not looking forward to listening to it again, but we might as well, let's together with our snakes get into today's conversation. Welcome to Covenant Conversations. My name is Kyle Burkholder, and I'm joined today by Carissa Wott. And Carissa is a frequent guest, and she will not like to hear this, but our most popular podcasts all feature Carissa. So welcome, Carissa. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you so much for welcoming me and embarrassing me right off the bat. Great news.
That's what we're here for. We're having a conversation, and we start with a little embarrassment. We humble each other. Today, Chris and I are talking about fear and anxiety, and it's important maybe to come up with how did that come up? So let me give a short backstory, and then I'm going to let her explain a little about what it is we're actually talking about, because I'm super curious where we're going to go. And this all came up because I was reading a book about nuclear war. And then I started telling my wife, who could care less about what I'm reading, about my book about nuclear war. And she said, I wouldn't read that. That would give me anxiety. And that got me curious because on some level, I am fearful on, some infinitesimal, not a real thing. But yeah, I don't like to think about it. I'm fearful of a nuclear war. That's a fear. But I have no anxiety about it. I don't lay awake at night wondering if someone's finger is going to slip on the button. None of those things. And so I said, I got to ask Carissa, how are fear and anxiety related? And as I started thinking through some of my questions, I thought, there's got to be so much more behind this. So, Carissa, I guess I start there. How are fear and anxiety related? And then maybe you'll start illustrating it with examples of where it's a healthy, indwelt, natural relationship. But take us wherever you want to take us. What am I thinking with fear and anxiety? What is happening here?
Okay. So I love an open question like that when it comes to fear and anxiety. There's so many places that we can go. But we'll just start out by talking about how fear and anxiety are actually different. Because a lot of times people like to group them together and talk about them as if they are the same thing. They are different. Now, they feel very similar in the body, which is why we tend to confuse them. But fear is really kind of our innate emotional response to an actual threat or danger, right? And so fear prompts our body to react in specific ways to help keep us safe, whether it is to preferably run away. That tends to be the body's first initial response to fear, is to run away or get away from the threat or danger if we can, or to respond in certain ways to promote our safety as best as we can in the middle of a threat. So that is fear. Anxiety is a little bit different. Anxiety really is kind of this sense of worry or unease about something that could happen. So fear tends to more be about what's here in the here and now, and anxiety is what is possible. And that thought about what is possible can absolutely prompt fear in that moment. So they can be connected that way. Anxiety can create fear. Fear, or the experience of fear, or the experience with threat, can then create anxiety or worry about future threat. But they both, when either one is present or when they both are present, our body tends to get pretty activated and reactive. And most people know what anxiety and fear feel like. It feels unpleasant, but it is safe, right? They both exist to try to keep us safe, which is where they're good and they're healthy. They can get out of hand, which we may get into as we speak more. But that's kind of how they are connected and how they impact one another.
So if I'm like a kid walking to school and I'm confronted by the bully, in that moment, I'm feeling fear. The bully is in front of me. I'm about to get pummeled. Oh, here we go. The next day when I leave my house to walk to school, I'm now primarily feeling anxiety because I'm afraid when I turn the corner, that bully is going to be there. And so I'm feeling anxious about it. it's
Yes.
possible when I turn the corner and I see the bully there again. Now fear and anxiety are mixing in together and I got it all in one place. Is
You
that
got it.
an accurate way to do it?
You got it. Exactly.
Okay. Um, where where do you see healthy fear in people's lives? Like we've talked about healthy anxiety, and what that's for and how that works. If people want to learn more about that, they can go back. We've kind of been through it before. You can glance on it if you want to, but what does healthy fear look like? Because so many people these days, especially, it seems like are gripped with fear, and it's almost it sends them into the fight, flight, or freeze. Where is fear good for us? Where do you see it healthfully being laid out for people?
You bet. So I think we have to really kind of ground ourselves constantly in what is actually happening in the here and now. And so this is where sometimes healthy fear almost needs to be, it doesn't have to be connected, but I almost have to talk about anxiety with healthy fear, if that's okay. When we have this lovely mix of healthy fear and healthy anxiety, we're staying in the present. So let me use an example. Let's say you are going for a hike, and not a Northwest Ohio hike. Let's think about a legitimate hike. You are in the mountains, right? You are on a trail and you start looking off to the side and you see a sheer drop off on the edge of the trail. There's no guardrails, right? In that moment, you're going to experience a little bit of healthy fear. That is a threat. That is a danger. You don't want to be nonchalant about what's happening. So you get this little hit of healthy fear. And what does it prompt you to do? It prompts you to scoot away from the edge, stay on the trail, right? That's a wonderful response. But when we start to kind of bring in a little bit of that healthy anxiety, a little bit of the, well, what could happen around the bend? What if I run into slippery rocks? What if there is a puddle? What if the trail gets really thin? These are all kind of these possibilities based on the reality that you're in this moment. And what that does is that helps keep your attention. That helps keep your awareness. And so you don't just make an adjustment and then skip on down the trail. You stay a little bit more vigilant and aware so you're ready to react if, again, another threat is present. So if there's ice on that trail, now you're ready to respond. That fear kicks in and you behave appropriately in that moment. So healthy fear and healthy anxiety can be connected to one another, but they're staying grounded in the here and now. And where fear starts to get a little bit more unhealthy is when we leave the here and now.
Okay. And so I'm on the trail. Tell me where, maybe the metaphor doesn't stretch there, but tell me where my fear is going to cause me to fall. Where does my fear paralyze me? I won't even take the trail.
Yeah.
Is there a way to kind of know when I'm getting too fearful? What's the diagnostic there? Because we all have people listening right now, we have our various places where we're experiencing fear. How do I know if I'm in the healthy zone?
That's a great question. So I think at times when fear kicks in, our logic kicks off. And so it's easy to say, well, I feel fear, so there must be a threat or a danger, which is not always the case. Just because we feel fear does not mean we are actually at risk. So can I use an example with you that you have mentioned before, your fear of snakes?
Sure. Yes.
Okay. So if you walked into somebody's home and they had a snake in an aquarium, you might have a fear response. Is that fair to say?
It is entirely 1,000% guaranteed to say yes.
Okay. In that moment, are you actually in danger? It feels like it.
So this is good. This is good, right? Because I'm now the test case and I'm failing. So the places my brain went when you asked me that is one, I know that I'm not in danger.
Yep.
Two, if they have one snake, they probably have more than one snake. And if they have one inside that aquarium, sometimes people let snakes out.
Yeah.
So maybe there's a snake under the couch
There
and
it
I don't
is.
want to stay here.
There it is. And do you see that beautiful interplay of fear and anxiety? Right? So fear is about what's in the here and now. There is a snake in an aquarium. That is what you know. That is what is real, right? And in that moment, you're safe. That snake is put away in the aquarium. Nobody's grabbing it out with their hands and saying, here, Kyle, hold this snake. You are safe. You feel fear and you are safe. But our body doesn't really like it so much when we feel fear. And so our mind kicks in and our mind's like, well, but if I am safe, why do I feel fear? I must not actually be safe. And so then your anxiety kicks in and it starts to tell you a story about what could happen, which you just so eloquently exemplified for us. Well, if there's one, there has to be another. If there's another, it had to have been left out. If it was left out, it's probably under the couch. Now, I know you use the language that it might be under the couch and there might be another one, but anxiety doesn't behave with mights, right? Or possibility. Even though you use that language, your anxiety, your brain is saying, no, there is one under that couch and I cannot sit down and I cannot even be in this house and now I need to leave. And so that's where we start with fear. We transition into anxiety and we start to think about what could happen. And then our anxiety tells us, nope, that in fact will happen, or it is happening and you can't tolerate that. And so then we run away. We try to escape and we try to leave. And then we lose opportunities to actually build skills in the moment, to engage in problem solving, to learn, oh, that situation actually was safe. There was only one snake. It stayed tucked away in the aquarium. And in fact, they closed the door so I didn't even have to think about the snake while I was there. You lose your chance to have those learning experiences and you walk away feeling more afraid and more anxious than you were when you actually just walked into the home in the first place.
Is this related, as you explain that, and that makes total sense, is this related, what is the therapy where it's put in right in front of me, where I would have to hold a snake? What's that called?
Exposure therapy.
There it is, exposure, because on tip of my tongue. So I have a friend, to take snakes on we go. I have a friend who also was terrified of snakes. And I say he was because we meet up every year for a retreat in Colorado and we're taking the switchbacks and doing, we're going to the retreat house. And I say something about snakes and he goes, oh, dude, I made peace with them. And I'm like, no, because we shared this and you made me feel better that you hated them too. And he had handled one. It didn't bite him. He was fine. And he's like, I'm fine with them now. They're good. They have a purpose. I'm cool with it.
Yep.
So is this, as he healthfully navigated his fear, is exposure therapy. So when you're saying I'll leave the room in that example and never get the benefit of being with the thing and learning that it's safe, is that one of the main negative outflows of this intermingling where I don't actually ever expose myself to the situation to learn that it is okay and I am strong and we are good and we're going to move forward? Is that kind of one of the big negative drivers or outcomes?
That's the primary negative driver, you bet. Because what happens is when you walk away, your anxiety actually goes up in the long run. Your fear goes up in the long run. When you stay, yes, your fear response does go up, but it can only go up so far. We weren't created with this uncontrolled fear response that is going to ruin us and destroy us, right? We were created with fear and with healthy anxiety to keep us safe. And so what happens is we become afraid of our own fear and we become afraid of our own reactions. And it starts to become that we're not even so much afraid of the situation anymore. We're afraid of how we will feel in that situation and that feeling will be so intolerable that we can't survive or make it through. And so when you engage in exposure, you're learning, one, the situation is actually pretty safe. We're never going to do exposure with like a venomous snake that will bite you and kill you, right? We're going to do exposure with a gardener snake that's actually safe, right? You learn that the situation is safe. But then you also learn that your feelings are safe. and they're going to rise and they're going to fall and you're going to be okay.
Hmm.
And even if somebody has a panic attack, which panic attack is the ultimate experience of fear and anxiety, right? As high as it can possibly go. And they are horrible feeling. I never wish a panic attack on anybody. They can be terrifying and they are completely benign and safe. They don't hurt you. They don't damage you. You come out of them naturally. You don't have to do anything if you experience one. They are safe. And so at some point we have to be willing to stop running away from our own fear and stop running away from our own emotions and trust that we were designed this way with a purpose. We're okay if we feel what we feel in those moments.
So do you spend time attempting to convince people to face their fears? Is face your fears sort of a clinically appropriate thing for us to tell ourselves to going, it's okay to face it?
Absolutely. Yeah. To face it head on and to trust that you're going to be okay. Mm-hmm.
So for instance, I know a mom who after one of those horrible seasons in our country where there were multiple school shootings and a movie theater shooting, and then I know a mom who was afraid of sending her kids to school, afraid of sending them to the movies, afraid of going shopping, afraid of the mall. And it was all, in one sense, wildly irrational. None of that happened here. In another sense, very rational. She's designed to protect her children. And so your advice, in a sense, not that person obviously has all their own issues that needs their own stuff. So we'll over-index on that. But one level or another, before they're going to feel healthy again in the world around them, they're going to have to face it. Kids are going to have to go to school and come home safe. We're going to have to go to the movies and it's going to be okay.
Yep.
That would be how that person navigates that sort of scenario.
Absolutely.
Okay. So parenting, I'm talking about a parent. You and I are about the same age. We had probably pretty similar childhoods, pretty free flowing. Not a whole lot of rules and regulations, a lot of latchkey kids. The 80s were the 80s. And then we had helicopter parenting came into vogue, and now snowplow parenting is in vogue. And there's a whole lot. I mean, there's another one beyond that. But let's just say, are there ways, if we're talking to parents now who still have kids at home and are still kind of working through the bits and pieces of this, are there ways that parents set their kids up for failure? I don't want to go all the way into, and maybe you do, maybe you can tell me how it's connected. I don't want to say we're giving our kids fear and anxiety, but there's ways we're not setting them up for success. What does that look like? What do you see? What are you experiencing as you deal with people in that space as parents, and how we're affecting kids with this?
Yeah. So I think parents have become afraid of their children's fear and anxiety, right? So just like we were talking about, some people don't trust themselves to be able to tolerate their own emotions. They're not trusting their kids to be able to tolerate their own emotions, which I actually think is really funny, because if you look at a toddler, like, they have completely uncontrolled, unbridled emotions that are unbelievably high in intensity, and they are just fine. They don't hurt them. They cope with them really well. And you can go from a 3-year-old with almost zero ability to cope, no skills to help them navigate their emotions. They can be lying on the floor, kind of just losing it. And a minute and a half later, they might be like, oh, you have my dinosaur? Okay, I'll take that, and move on, right? So I think we have to go into it knowing that the emotions themselves are not dangerous. And so when a kid comes to you and they're afraid of their fear and they're afraid of their anxiety, kind of we as a parent, we have to step in and say, yeah, that feels really bad, doesn't it? And you're safe. And so how can I walk alongside of you to help you build skills to navigate the fear and anxiety, and to differentiate between something that could happen versus something that is actually a danger in the present moment? Because we don't avoid possibilities. Just because something is possible, it doesn't mean that it's relevant to us right now. And I think that's a really important thing for us to all learn and to be able to teach our kids. So to use a silly example, Could a meteor fall out of the sky and hit the earth tonight? Absolutely, right? That is possible. But is that relevant for our here and now? Do we need to be spending any time or any energy on that? No. And I know that that seems like an extreme example. And so parents are saying, well, but there's so many more possibilities. What if the teacher is rude to my kid? It's possible. One, can your kid survive that? Yeah, we want to be able to teach them to survive when somebody is rude to them and treating them unkindly. Two, will it destroy their entire sense of self and their well-being? Does that have to be relevant to you in the here and now? Or do we need to focus on what does this kid need to thrive and grow? They need to get an education. They need to socialize. They need to navigate issues that pop up in their day. So if we start to view kind of fear and anxiety as opportunities for growth versus problems, we start to be able to back away a little bit as parents and start to trust our kids to learn how to handle what they can handle and then come to us when they need a little bit of support, and we can step in and not steamroll, or snowplow, whatever the new phrase is now, over everything that's in front of them, but we can walk alongside of them and kind of gently encourage them and kind of train them how to cope.
This feels like it's in the realm of building resilience. Yep. And so would you say the phrase you were saying, and I went, it sounds like you're saying we as human beings, but kids in particular, in a lot of ways, are emotionally resilient. Would you say that's true?
Absolutely.
Okay. So if that's true, then we can not take advantage of their resilience, but leverage that resilience for lessons as we go. And so if they have fears or if they have anxieties, we know that their emotions are resilient, and we know that taking them through something difficult grows them into the person that the next time around will be less negatively affected and more resilient. Is that essentially the recipe?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Okay.
And if we think of that resilience as like a muscle that we need to develop, then again, we're looking for these opportunities. Each time we experience a challenge, we're working out that muscle of resilience. And if you never experience a challenge, you never actually build up that muscle. And so we can take that natural ability and develop it further, or we can take that natural ability and over time we can actually weaken it because you've got no opportunities to use it. And if you don't use it, you start to lose it, right?
Wow. So the atrophying of these emotional muscles, or of this resilience that we cultivate over time, that almost takes me back to COVID. Nobody wants to talk about that or think about it, but there was this long season where our kids weren't exposed to certain things, and lacking that exposure, a lot of those skills, if you ask teachers, and they have these certain pockets of kids that are like this age kid who was this age during the pandemic, they don't have this skill they need, and they missed the whole window for it.
Yeah.
Oh, wow. Okay. I'm swimming in this. I don't know. I feel like there are 1,000 follow-ups about this, because I think the parenting aspect is so critical, because we get it better. I do. Let me not project. I get it better when you tell me about my kids and how to not ruin my kids or how to help my kids. Or I can think of my kids and their issues, and it's crystal clear. We all can, right? We're consultants, each of us. But that actually helps me apply it to myself to go, okay, now what am I fearing? Where are my anxieties? And what does healthy, resilient exposure look like? Huh. Okay. So let me twist here. Let me keep it moving and twist on that. So now that I think we have a breakthrough, now comes a good time for Christian guilt. So, 1 John says, perfect love casts out fear. Matthew 6 says, don't be anxious in anything. Then we have fears. We have anxieties. So we're frail and we know it, but how do we work through life with present fears? And I think maybe the biggest hurdle for us is what do I do with the guilt and the shame of that? Because I have that sometimes when I go, why am I anxious about this? It's going to be fine. And we beat ourselves up, and that seems to create a doom loop instead of some virtue cycle. how do I deal with the fears and anxiety there? And as a Christian, is there something I need to think about differently? Is there some other way I need to view fear and anxiety that maybe the world or a popular podcast or a book I read that they're not telling me or teaching me? They don't have the whole story. Is there something as a Christian, how do I think through that better?
Okay, great questions. And I'm going to probably lose track of a couple of those questions as we go. So I'm going to have you redirect me back to a couple of those. So I don't think that we need to have guilt or shame about feeling fear. Got a little background noise. Feeling fear or anxiety, I don't think that's the problem. I think the problem is, how do we engage with it? So those are emotions that are built into us by our Creator. So we don't have to judge the fact that we have them. The question becomes, are we controlled by them? And if I feel fear, while I know something is safe and I move towards that thing and allow that fear to be present, what happens is that fear is going to naturally dissipate over time. That's the relationship that we want to have with it. It's not that it should never show up, right? I think that you're created to say, hey, if there was a bear in this room with me, it's appropriate for me to feel fear in that moment. There is a threat that allows me to respond. But feeling fear about fear, I don't know that is really kind of having faith in God, having faith in our design, actually kind of trusting, right, our Creator, trusting that He is there for us and that He's bigger than our fear. And so, sorry, I'll let you ask a question if you had a thought.
No, go ahead. Okay. I don't want to slow you down.
Okay. So then I think the next step that we have to look at is, how often are we trying on, quote unquote, other people's circumstances? And how does that create unnecessary fear and anxiety? And we are very good at doing that, right? And I think maybe that's what Stephanie was talking about when you were talking about reading that book about nuclear war. She's like, I don't want to read that. I don't want to try that on. That's scary. Of course, we imagine ourselves in war-torn countries. We imagine ourselves in the place of our friend who's grieving deeply. We imagine what we would be like in a horrific situation. And then we get disappointed that we can't figure out how to cope our way through that. We're not supposed to cope our way through that. That is not ours. That was not given to us. God is not alongside of us, walking with us through that journey to help us navigate through it, because it was never ours to begin with. It doesn't fit us or our experience. And so we have to practice stepping away from that habit. If it is not ours, we can't put it on to see if it fits us. It will never fit us.
Is there a mantra? Is there a sentence? Is there, so let's say she's in that moment and she's triggered in fear and she goes, I'm afraid of nuclear war. You're giving me anxiety even talking about this book. How would she arrest that thought in that moment? Is there something that you would coach someone into? Is there a way other than holding every thought captive? I mean, Scripture gives us nice concepts, but sometimes we go, okay, but how? What does that sound like? What does that sound like?
Yeah. I am a big fan of coming back to the here and now. So in that moment, you actually come back and you take a second and you say, I am sitting in my living room. Maybe she could say something like this. I am sitting in my living room. I am talking to my husband. He is casually reading a book about a scary topic, right? But in order to casually read a book about a scary topic, we have to be safe in this moment, right? We are living in a home that is secure in an area where we have not had this threat come our way. We are safe in this moment. And there has to be some intentionality about coming back to what is real right now. And anxiety will fight you because it will say, okay, but that's real right now, but it could happen, right? And that's the temptation, is to go with what could just because it's a possibility with them, we have to interact with it. We have to pause and to say, but it's not here. And we have to kind of almost doggedly choose to stay here sometimes.
Makes a ton of sense. So it's what's true here and now.
Yep.
How much of this is true today for me in my context? That's great, because that even wars against the comparison of the internet and all the things that creates in us. It's someone else is going through, even the good things, when we're comparing. But okay, what about my life right now? There's so many heart-wrenching stories out there, and people we're praying for and all the things. And if we took on all of their stuff, we would crumble. The beauty of this is, as you were saying it, so I think probably everybody heard background noise for a minute. So there's a school that meets in our building. They had a fire drill, apparently, and there's the beeping that begins, and then a woman's voice comes over speakers I can't see that says, "Don't take the elevator." We don't even have an elevator. I'm going, is the elevator on fire? And to the uninitiated, it's the perfect thing. I mean, it's just, thank you, Lord. That's a fear and anxiety inducing thing, because we didn't see that coming. I've thought about it every podcast we record. I'm ready for the lawnmowers to start outside. So they went this morning. They're not going to happen now. I think through all the things, but even it's an alarm that I know, to your point, let me flesh that out all the way. The fire alarm is going off. The woman is telling me not to use the elevator. What's true here and now? There is no fire. We have no elevator. We're good. It's a fire drill. And I can exist here and now just fine. I can mute my microphone for a minute, continue the podcast, and it'll all be okay. Yeah. Is that the helpful example of what you're aiming for there?
Absolutely. And I think it kind of even rolls right into the last piece of my answer to that kind of multi-layered question, which is fear and anxiety, when they are unhealthy, they are always connected to an unhealthy desire for control. And I'll just call myself out. I love the idea of control. I would like to be in control all the time. I think a lot of people fall into that category. And if you struggle with anxiety, you very much desire control. Anxiety tries to tell you that the only way that you will be okay is if you are certain of the outcome. That's what worry is all about, is trying to make you certain of the outcome. It doesn't work, but that's the goal of worry. And we have to be willing to acknowledge that we do not have very much control. And at first that feels really, really frightening, right? And the idea of not having control is scary, but it's only scary if we believe that we are supposed to have control, which we're not. Again, we are not God. We did not create the universe. We did not develop the structure of our bodies and our humanity and our emotions. We were not designed to be fully in control all the time. And the more that we glorify control, the more fearful and the more anxious we are. And the more that we glorify God, it doesn't make anxiety and fear go away, but that tends to kind of decrease the fear and anxiety that we have.
So I'm currently, because I love every bit of that, and it's right in line with what I've just finished. We're in this sermon series. We got to talk about Matthew 6 and anxiety and worry and control and insecurity seem to be maybe two parts of the same ism, for whatever we want to call it. Lacking control, I now feel insecure because someone else is in charge of it. What you said, I think at the end, was really powerful. I'm not supposed to be in control. Would you even go so far as to say, as with a child, that I can have security and I can have a soul at peace, for lack of a better way to say it, when I trust the one who is in control? Mm-hmm. And so once we realize we're not supposed to be, then it really is about who is in control and are they trustworthy? If I'm in the car with somebody, is a great way to do it. When you're in the car with somebody and you don't know, they're a terrible driver, you're all over the road, you have a healthy, normal fear and anxiety in that zone because this is not going to go well. when you've ridden 100 times or 1,000 times with somebody and you trust them, you take a nap in the car because you're not worried. They're in control to the level any of us ever are, but we trust it. Is the trust and the insecurity and the control, is all of that kind of ball of wax? Is that all kind of one big thing for us?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And when we try to put all of our trust in ourselves, we disappoint ourselves all the time, right? And then that's when we get afraid. Well, I can't handle it. I can't do it. And at that moment, not to be too like flippant, but sometimes I want to say, well, yeah, duh. You weren't supposed to. Of course, this doesn't work. And so kind of like a toddler who's saying, well, I want to do it myself. We'll let that toddler try, but inevitably they're going to fail. And having that toddler come to a parent and having a parent lovingly say, let me help you. Let me do it for you. I am trustworthy. I am here, right, to help take care of your needs. That's really freeing for that toddler. That's incredibly safe. That doesn't make every single problem that they will ever face in their life disappear, but there's a safety and security in that. And we're never going to get that safety and security from ourselves. Yeah.
That's good. That's rich. This is a lot. As usual, 36 minutes in, I'm thinking this is, I got to go back and listen now. So let me close it by asking you this. So someone is listening right now and they're going, I struggle with fear and anxiety, one or the other, both, all the above. And I want to wake up tomorrow and be better. I want to wake up tomorrow and have less of the unhealthy sides of that. What would your one summarizing sentence statement-ish thing, what would that be to that person to say, okay, you want to start, here's what you start, or here's how the journey begins? What would you give that person as that grain of hope as they try to take on a healthier way of fear and anxiety in the future?
So first and foremost, I would say your anxiety and your fear is not going to hurt you. If you let it control you, we see damage coming because you're stepping away from your life. Allow them to be present, fight less against them, and live your life. So if you can try one thing a day that you can do that makes you feel a little bit afraid, that makes you feel a little bit nervous. Don't choose something that puts your fear at a 10 out of 10 and puts you into panic. But maybe choose something that puts you at a 3 or a 4, where you feel unsettled, a little bit afraid, but you can actually know that it's safe. Lean into that. Start pushing yourself a little bit each day to build your muscle, to build your tolerance for managing that fear and anxiety. Let it be there. Let it show up. Learn that you can get through it, and then keep living. Keep those feet moving. It's amazing how far you can get in a very short amount of time if you're willing to lean into the fear as opposed to run away from it and try to control it.
Wow. Well, there it is. I cannot add to that. I'm afraid I'm going to have to go find a snake and hold it now as my own example of overcoming some of these things. Carissa, as always, thank you for gracing us with your time and your expertise and your wisdom. We are forever grateful. And like I said, you are the top of the charts. People are desperate for this stuff. So I look forward to the next chance we have to take one of my zany questions off the shelf and let you unpack some of what God's doing in us. Thank you for your time. Everybody, thank you for listening and being part of this, for engaging in this. It's a joy to have this conversation and to do it with you. So we look forward to joining you again on the very next Covenant Conversations.